All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our next session. Our next session will be a panel discussion. I think this is the first time we've done a panel discussion here at CPE Day, so hopefully you enjoy. My name's Mark Wolstoncroft. I will be the moderator this morning. I'm a partner in our audit and assurance group. And for those of you who have been here before, you realize that I'm the guy that tells the bad jokes. But today I'll be the guy who asks the bad questions. But we'll do our best. So today we're fortunate to have 4 outstanding professionals with us. Each brings some unique perspective. Just wanted to start with a couple brief introductions. I'll introduce them and then give them some time to talk a little bit about themselves as well. So first, nearest to me, we have Emmie Calland. She is the Chief of Staff with the Pittsburgh Foundation, obviously a well-known foundation here in the Pittsburgh area. They work to improve the quality of life in the region by evaluating and addressing community issues, promoting responsible philanthropy, and connecting donors to critical needs in the community. Thank you for being here. Next we have Stephanie Samolovitch, and she is the founder and executive director for Young Adult Survivors United. It's a health and wellness community for young adult cancer survivors. And the organization provides emotional and mental health, social and financial support, and enhances the quality of life for young adult cancer survivors. We also have Nate Gressel. Nate is the Chief Executive Officer at George Junior Republic, where he provides strategic leadership and oversight for all organizational operations, including their multi-state residential and clinical treatment programs for both youth and adults. And lastly, we have our own Megan Troxell. Megan is a leader in our firm's not-for-profit practice and focuses a considerable amount of her time and her expertise serving our community both personally and professionally. So thank you everybody for being here. We're going to start just by asking each of you to tell us a little bit about yourselves, a little bit about your background, and we'll just start. We'll start here with Emmie and work on down the line if that works for you.
Great, thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. As Mark said, I'm Emmie Calland. I'm Chief of Staff with the Pittsburgh Foundation, and we work to improve the quality of life in the Pittsburgh region. Unlike a lot of other foundations that are funded by either, let's say, a wealthy family, like you have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or funded by a for-profit organization like you have the PNC Bank Foundation, we are funded by donors from all around the region who care about Pittsburgh and come to us and create charitable funds, donor-advised funds, and we help them execute on their philanthropy. So if you or your loved ones or some of your clients really care about Pittsburgh, you can always send them our way, and we'd love to help them actualize the Pittsburgh of the future that they see. In terms of my background, you can read about me online, but some quick facts. I graduated from Mount Lebanon, so I'm a Lebo Blue Devil. Any Blue Devils in the house? Anyone? Oh yeah, we got one. I also went to University of Notre Dame. Any Domers in the house? Yeah, we got a few. And as you may know, Notre Dame is coming to play at Heinz Field this Saturday against my other alma mater, Pitt. I have my master's in public administration from the University of Pittsburgh, and I also teach there. Prior to my role as Chief of Staff, I worked on the fundraising side of our house, primarily on the development side of the house, and in a previous life, I worked in the for-profit sector. I installed the electronic health record and traveled around to different health systems all around the country. I now reside in Morningside, the Morningside neighborhood right by the zoo, if you're familiar with that area. Last thing I want to say is that there are 3 types of people: those who can count and those who cannot. Thank you. Yes. And I'm proud to say that there are 2 folks here in the room who can count from our team. 2 of our own accountants are here in the audience. We have Brian Tate, our CFO, and Denitra Mason, our controller. They're 2 of the best in the biz. So if I get anything wrong, they're here to correct me. So thank you guys for all you do. And I'll hand it over.
Excellent, thanks, Emmie. Stephanie?
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, Stephanie Samolovitch. I'm the founder and executive director of Young Adult Survivors United. I come with a little bit of a unique story in the sense that I will start with a personal background before I go into the mission of the organization. In September this year, I celebrated my 20th leukemia anniversary and my 40th birthday, so you can do the math if you can count. Yeah. So I was diagnosed with leukemia when I was 20. This is back in 2005. And ever since then, I've been on a mission to fill a gap of resources for this often overlooked cancer population. We define young adults who are diagnosed between the ages of 18 and 45. So as I reference the organization today, I will ask you to think about your lives in your 20s, your 30s, and early 40s, where you are, what you're building as an independent, and having it all come crashing down with a cancer diagnosis. And so I had to learn that firsthand. In order to realize that there was really no support, and oftentimes even today when I mention the word young adult, people will say, oh my gosh, thanks for supporting the kids. And they're not kids. And so between 2012 and 2019, after earning my master's in social work degree from University of Pittsburgh, I realized that this was a bigger mission than just a program at a charity that I used to work for. It was a small charity in Pittsburgh called the Cancer Caring Center. After building a young adult cancer community, I realized that they needed a lot more support, I needed a lot more funding, I needed a lot more help. And so I took the bull by the horns, and on March 1st of 2020, I launched the organization. I screamed to the public, we're doing this, and 2 weeks later, you all know what happened. So when the world shut us down, I had to figure it out. I was in survival mode for all of 2020. We were a volunteer organization. Our board of directors were obviously impacted as well, but we have grown very fast over the past 5 years. So as I referenced the organization being a 5-year charity, I've been in this field for many years. But I will say when I was at the Cancer Caring Center, I was the director of support services. I knew nothing about being a founder or an executive director of an organization. So it's a very young organization still, and I'm learning a lot as we talk about today. So it's a very honor to be here, and we're very grateful for partners like the Pittsburgh Foundation. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephanie. Nate?
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. My name is Nathan Gressel. I work for George Junior Republic and its affiliates, primarily out of the Grove City location. I've been in the behavioral health field for 25 years now. Prior to coming to George Junior in 2019, I worked for an organization for nearly 20 years called Beacon Light Behavioral Health System. I've spent my whole professional career in behavioral health, whether that was to 5-year-old kids, to youth, adolescents, adults, both community-based, residential-based services. I have a passion for working with diverse populations, underserved populations, and I am really focused on really maximizing opportunities for not only our kids, but the staff that we serve. George Junior Republic, I've been there for now 7 years, is a much larger organization than what most would think. We have a 550-acre campus in Grove City that's primarily the residential portion of the organization, but we also have 2 community-based organizations. One, George Junior Republic in Indiana, where we serve about 63 counties in the state. We're the largest provider of community-based services in the state. And they serve anywhere between 1,200 to 2,000 youth every single day. And we also have a company called Preventative Aftercare, which serves about 23 counties in the state of Pennsylvania, working with youth, young adults, adults themselves, and 2 counties in the state of Ohio. My whole professional career has been in the nonprofit space. I really am focused on innovation, the future of mental health services, behavioral health services, and really focusing on future opportunities and new models of care. Unfortunately, Pennsylvania has a very antiquated system of delivery for mental health services, and that's an area that I'm really, really focused on and really enjoy working on.
Thank you. Megan?
All right, good afternoon. It's so great to see so many of you here. I'm Megan Troxell. I'm a partner in our audit and assurance group, and I work very closely with many nonprofits and just really appreciate what Grossman, Yannick, and Ford can offer to our nonprofits, and really like the chance to get to do that. So I think, as auditors, when we come in and are providing professional services to nonprofits, we have a unique seat where we are sitting and, get to come alongside of nonprofits. And hopefully, if we're doing our jobs well, it enables our nonprofit organizations to have good, sound financial information and be able to make decisions more clearly. So our practice, really serves nonprofits across the board. We have anything from small social service agencies to educational institutions. We have some faith-based organizations and private foundations. So really, service across the board. I think what I really like about serving our nonprofit clients is that in a unique way, we're able to, come alongside, and while we're not going to be in the day-to-day operations, we get to help nonprofits fulfill their mission in some way, shape, or fashion, and of course get to interact with plenty of fantastic people like our other panelists here, and many of you in the audience.
All right, thank you everybody for those introductions. As Megan mentioned, not-for-profit work really is an important part of our practice. It's not something we've had the opportunity to really highlight here at CPE Day before, so we're looking forward to that. It's important to us professionally. We do audits of not-for-profit companies or organizations. We also do help with Form 990s, BCO 10s, other compliance items. So, and then on top of it being important for us professionally, it's important for the folks at GYF personally too. Like many of you, we serve on boards of not-for-profits, we volunteer for not-for-profits, and we contribute to not-for-profits. So it really is something that we're happy to be able to host some time today on. We're going to move into a time for some questions. I'm going to start with some specific questions for our panelists, and then we'll also do some questions that are more broad for all of you. I'm going to start with Nate first. Nate, we're coming out of both a state budget impasse and obviously the federal government shutdown, and each of which impact a lot of people in this room, whether they're for-profits or not-for-profits. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you manage the complexities of compliance and reporting across really multiple funding sources, including state and federal funds. Meanwhile, also anticipating changes that are bound to happen.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So to some degree, I think you're trying to bait me into conversations. It has been a huge struggle for nonprofit organizations across Pennsylvania during the budget impasse specifically. As an organization, George Junior was not as impacted with the federal shutdown as we were with the state budget impasse. About 90% of George Junior Republic's funding comes directly from state, county dollars, and then there's a federal match. And then the other 10% is a combination of Medicaid funded programs, which are thankfully mandated. But it has been a significant challenge. I'm the current chair of the Grove City Area United Way, and we support 11 local nonprofits, and the stories that they're telling to just grasp onto their staff and provide services and such a high demand has been very, very challenging for all nonprofits. As far as the complexities of compliance is an area that I really enjoy. I usually get a strange look when I say that, but it is an area of focus that I enjoy, along with regulations and acronyms. Megan can attest to that. Really, I think the focus of a good compliance program and managing the complexity is having good leadership and a formal compliance plan. The transparency that needs to exist in any compliance program really needs to be from the direct support staff, the support staff members, all the way up to the executive leadership of the organization. Sometimes regulation and compliance people don't like to talk about. People don't like to have those uncomfortable conversations. But from my perspective, having uncomfortable conversations about issues that can relate back to revenues, programs, Your reputation as a provider is super important to have, and you need to have those uncomfortable conversations. But you also, that compliance plan really should be the backbone of your organization. It should be the checks and balances that you've set up to test your services and recognize where there are areas of issue or concern. If they need to be reported, then you report them. Oftentimes payers, we work with managed care organizations, commercial payers, we work with the state and federal government. Oftentimes, as part of your compliance plan, if you have a proactive approach to identifying potential compliance issues, those funders are super agreeable to work with you and recognize that you are a trusted provider. You have good integrity as a provider. They feel safe with having a relationship with you, taking care of other humans, as well as providing good quality outcomes and care. The reputation side of the equation is huge in my mind, specifically with managed care organizations. They have a higher level of compliance that they look in on funding streams. Over my 25 years, I've developed, I think, very good relationships with the Medicaid managed care organizations in Pennsylvania. And I always appreciate when I get the first phone call and they'll say, "Hey, Nate, we have a new idea. Is this something you'd be interested in? Hey, Nate, we've worked with you before on this. You have a past of innovation and positive outcomes. We'd like to work with you on that." If you don't have that reputation with a payer, then you're not going to be that first call. Sure, you can go down the road to an RFP, which is part of the process, but being that first call to fix a solution as quick as you possibly can is really one of my biggest focus and goals. So the complexities of compliance, when you have good systems set up, to me, they take care of themselves. And then also you have the opportunity to build and expand your programs.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question is for Stephanie. Stephanie, you mentioned that your organization is relatively young and growing, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about your approach to financial oversight and accountability in a growing organization.
Thank you. Can I start by asking a show of hands of who in the audience is connected to a nonprofit, whether it be a board, whether it be council, anyone involved with nonprofits? That's exciting. Thank you. I think for any nonprofit organization that is founded, it's very likely that they don't have a finance background. I have a social work background, as I mentioned in my introduction, and so coming into the nonprofit space, we have to learn very quickly to lean on the experts, right? To lean on the experts who become our board of directors, to lean on a finance committee. You know, we had to build that over the past couple of years. I had to very quickly find a bookkeeper. I knew I needed QuickBooks Online during this pandemic, but I didn't know how to operate it or build it. So I learned very quickly to lean on the experts that could help us build the organization the right way and make sure that we were dotting our I's and crossing our T's. But over the years, as an executive director, you kind of oversee all of it, but you can't take responsibility or accountability for all of it. So I think when we're reflecting on our organization, you know, financial oversight, it plays a big part with myself and with the board of directors, primarily starting with the finance committee. But we're always transparent with the entire board. And then financial oversight is often turned to the bookkeeper, you know, so there's a lot of shared oversight. We also work with Megan and her team. So I've learned a lot over the years already, even though it's been 5 years, that there has to be shared oversight. And as far as accountability, again, that could be individual or shared. Being the executive director and wearing many hats and having to build this very fast-growing organization, I am accountable for many, many things. But I, again, will lean on others to help me when I don't know the answer. Because a lot of times, when you're building a nonprofit, you don't know the answers, and it's ongoing that you're learning and adapting and changing, especially with the political aspect of things. And funding is always changing. You know, we're always looking at our budgets, which still, when we're projecting what next year is going to look like, it's a guessing game sometimes because of what's going on in the world. You know, we just talked about the budgets. And so I have a lot of oversight and a lot of accountability, but it's been a blessing to say that with the experts, like some of you out there who are involved in nonprofits, you are helping us stay organized, stay compliant, and stay focused on the growth of the organization financially. because we've had some setbacks. We thought 2024, it was our best year financially, and then this year it went down because budgets are being cut. You know, I was just sharing with Emmie today that the least amount of funding we're getting is from foundations because the need is growing, but the amount of budget is down. And so you're really fighting for the dollars. I hate to use that word, I hate to use the word competing, but it's the truth. So you really have to be open-minded. You really have to work with your teams, and you really have to ask, you know, for that oversight if you don't know the answer. And that's what it's been a hard thing to come to terms with, but doing that has helped us grow much more over the years.
Excellent. Yeah, that board level involvement is important in all of the not-for-profit organization, but I think especially in an organization like yours as you're getting started. Next, for Emmie, the Pittsburgh Foundation, I think, has a somewhat unique perspective, it being that you serve both donors in some respect and you're a foundation supporting not-for-profits. So I wondered if you could talk just a little bit about what practices or reporting standards you look for in grantee organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, to ensure general compliance and transparency, we're looking for, you know, some basic reports. We're looking for complete financial statements with a qualified audit. I'm sure as many of you are familiar. We're looking for 990s, so federal tax forms that are filed with the federal government and an up-to-date tax exempt status, right? And then importantly, we're looking for an annual budget. And then if an organization is looking for funding for a particular program, so let's say an organization is looking for funding for an after-school program for girls in grades 2 through 4, we're looking for a budget specific to that program in addition to the overall budget, right? So those are the primary forms that we ask for at the Pittsburgh Foundation and are commonly asked for by foundations across the country, I would say. But in terms of financial practices, we're looking for a few things. Many are the same as what you'd see in the for-profit environment, right? We're looking for a balanced budget. We're looking for liquidity. You know, do we have the cash on hand that we need? We're looking for healthy reserves, if possible. Not always possible in this environment, as Stephanie highlighted. Does the organization have any debt? And if so, how is that debt being managed? And as Stephanie mentioned as well, oversight from the board. Do you have a strong board and strong financial and audit committee who is looking at the finances? So, you know, a lot of these concepts are familiar to most of us in the room. But a few things I wanted to highlight that we're looking at specifically from the nonprofit standpoint is spending aligned with mission and impact? So is what's being written in the grant report matching what we're seeing in the budget and matching what we're seeing on the financial reporting, right? So that's really important. We're also often, in the nonprofit sector, it's really highlighted, and I want to kind of debunk this myth, that you should have a really low ratio of program expenses to overhead. So folks say, really reduce overhead. All of your funding should go to programmatic causes. So it should go to the crayons for the art project. It should go to transportation for the seniors to and from that senior center. But in reality, most of nonprofit work is centered around people and done by people. What do people require? Salaries. What does a senior center require? Utilities, rent. So we're not looking for a particular ratio, right, of program to overhead. What we're looking for is what's in the budget matching what the needs of the organization are? Because at the end of the day, what we're looking for is impact, not necessarily just efficiency. Efficiency is important, but we're not here to be as efficient as possible and turn a profit, right? The goal is to be mission aligned. And so we're looking for finances that reflect mission-based alignment. And then lastly, what I'll say, I could talk on this for a while, but the last thing I'll say is that we're looking for sustainability and capacity. So can the organization steward a grant of the size that they're asking for? That's a bit subjective. But if a nonprofit has a budget of is relatively small, has a budget of $100,000, and they're asking for a $500,000 grant, we want to understand how can that organization scale up to support that money, right? Are you going to hire new people? What are you doing with those funds? What program is this going towards? Are they able to steward those funds in a way that's responsible? And in addition, long-term sustainability. So if we're providing a grant that lasts 2 years, what other foundations or funding or individual donors are at the table to support that funding? And then in addition, once that funding is up, what is the plan for that nonprofit for long-term sustainability? So those are some of the things that we're looking for and when reading both the grant application and looking at the financial side of nonprofits applications. We also, of course, ask for a lot of things on the back end once the grant is completed. There's grant reporting, but I won't get into that today for purposes of time. But yeah, I think that about sums it up.
Excellent, thank you. Megan, you serve a lot of not-for-profits, various sizes, various different missions, but wondered if you could talk a little bit about the most common accounting and compliance issues that you see as you're working with not-for-profit organizations.
Thanks. So I would say in response to that question that there's really two areas that we come across, time and time again when we're working with our nonprofit organizations. And the first would be around donor restrictions. So a donor contributes funds and has a specific stipulation that comes along with that contribution. How's that being accounted for? And then tracked as that purpose is maybe being fulfilled. And then also, second would be, we knew what our questions were here, but we did not coordinate any answers per se. And you're hearing funding streams come up, time and time again here. So when funding streams are changing, how are we looking at those? How are we accounting for those? And so those are sort of the two areas. I would say going a little bit more deeper, on the with donor restrictions, those can look quite a bit different depending on the donor that you have coming to your organization who wants to see your organization fulfill something. So we will end up having program-specific donor restrictions. So, they want to see you achieve something very specific. We'll have time restrictions when we know that we're getting a contribution from a donor, but it's maybe over the course, of a number of years. And then, of course, we would have permanently restricted contributions when an endowment comes into play. So I think, important for organizations is being able to recognize those when those contributions come in, and then track as those are being used. And there can be a lot of nuance to some of that, and it becomes pretty detailed too. When we talk a little bit about the funding streams, again, I think because nonprofits are always looking at where their funding is coming from, and that can change over the course of a number of years as the landscape changes and as the organization changes. You need to constantly be looking at that and assessing what those contributions look like, if they are from donors or foundations. If you have government contracts, what the stipulations are with that. And oftentimes when we're talking about government contracts or other funding, we need to look at whether it truly is a contribution or whether it is revenue and exchange transaction. So when we're looking at all of this, I would say generally, while there's some gray area and some room for interpretation, there's generally a right answer to most of these things, but it takes a little bit of thinking through the process and digesting some of the information and then coming up with the right answer, getting it reported correctly, tracking it, and disclosing anything. So I think being proactive if you are unsure about how to recognize anything, talking with GYF or your provider as to how to appropriately do that. So it's always helpful to have those conversations on the front end, so that there aren't surprises.
Thanks, Megan. Going back to Nate. Nate, a little bit earlier, you talked a little bit about how the size of George Jr. might surprise some folks. And obviously you have a big team that you work with, both on a leadership team perspective and number of program folks that are working for George Jr. I just wondered if you could tell us about, what strategies you found effective in communicating financial information both to your leadership team and to your program staff.
Sure. So as I had mentioned earlier, I started my career in behavioral health when I was actually an undergrad for business management. was going to school in Bradford, Pennsylvania, and it was an entry-level job that everyone in the fraternity were getting jobs there, so why not? So it was an entry-level position. And I worked my way up very quickly. I had no intentions on my end game being in behavioral health or human services. Went on and you had mentioned getting your MSW at Pitt, guilty, and then later on my MBA. But I think my path through my professional career and where it started is super important to how we communicate with our staff at George Junior Republic, many of which are entry-level positions. So we employ about 430 staff across our system, across multiple states. And where I feel it has been super valuable is to know your audience. Know your audience and what kind of conversations can you have with a direct care staff member versus a treatment staff versus a program director versus some type of vice presidential position within the organization. Those relationships are super important. Direct care staff at that level sometimes don't feel as though the budget means anything to them, or they can't be impactful, or understand the fact that if you go and get your physical every year, hopefully there's good outcomes and our health insurance costs will go down. That's not super important to them. But I think one of the approaches that I've used coming to the table is I was a direct care staff. These are some of the challenges that I was faced with early on in my career as it relates to budget, as it relates to utilization, as it relates to productivity, as it relates to what are areas and opportunities that we can look at the budget a little bit differently. Those are more real life scenarios for a direct care staff member. Then you go up to the clinical world and the conversations change a little bit because we start talking about productivity, quality of care, outcomes, evidence-based programming, all things that have a much more significant cost to them. And then up from there, you go into the leadership of the organization where they really need to have the high-level perspective of the organization and how it's functioning. One of the areas that we've invested in over the past 2 years is a new ERP system where we have data and analytics and dashboards at our fingertips now. Prior to, the decisions and financial decisions were made more on an emotions-based, or this is what's good for kids. And I'm not suggesting that's a bad approach, but you have to look at the data and you have to have the tools to have that data available to your leadership staff, as well as share that with the direct care staff so they can understand how they also can impact the finances of the organization. So with that, communication is always a big priority that I have. I want to be very approachable for my direct care staff. I don't want them to be fearful of me and my leadership staff. We need to have frank conversations and level with each other and understand that the budget is important. This is the parameters of the budget. And then we also need to continuously be reinventing ourselves for next year's budget challenges or the new pay ranges we're going to have to be competitive with in the next year that we can't even begin to look at now because the numbers are so outrageous. So it's a constant struggle, and I've really pushed forward with communication. One of the nice things that came out of the pandemic is that opportunity for communication with all of the staff at George Junior Republic. Still to this day, actually earlier this morning, I have a Zoom call with all of George Junior Republic, and I have my updates. We're talking about open enrollment, all the good stuff. But it's also an opportunity or time for staff to just ask questions. And it really makes and bridges a gap between leadership and the direct care staff, the true resource of your organization, and really makes them feel more comfortable having these discussions as opposed to having a direct care staff that has never seen a budget at George Junior before. So I really try to normalize that as much as possible, and at the same time educate them and show them that they are a piece of this bigger pie, and everything they do is impactful towards the organization. And I think it really ups the value proposition for our direct care staff to feel valued and respected within the organization.
Excellent, thanks Nate. Stephanie, back to you. You mentioned a little bit in your comments earlier about what it was like getting off the ground from a financial perspective, involving the board in that process, involving obviously an accountant in that process. But I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about maybe some challenges that you faced in building a financial infrastructure and how you address them, or tips that you might have from others that are maybe with organizations that are growing.
Thank you. I will echo what Nate just said about communication. It is so important for us, meaning my assistant director and myself. I didn't mention this, but we're two full-time staff and 2 part-time staff, and one of the part-time is remote. So we're a very small organization in that regard, which means more communication is even more important. Before the pandemic, speaking from a budget standpoint, I was building a program, if you will, and then having to build a budget for an organization is much different. And so initially, when I had initial meetings with my board that I built essentially with the pandemic at hand, we had to be creative because we had to build a budget now with a virtual platform. So, and the other issue and challenge, I should say, for us is we don't just offer one program. This is an organization that provides emotional, social, and financial support. So there's different programs, there's different costs for those programs. So we really have to be mindful of the funding that we have, what we project we're going to get, how we're going to build the infrastructure to support that. And that's constantly changing, but that means we have to have more conversations. I have to talk to my staff more often and really evaluate the outcomes, that we're getting, the data that we're seeing. I have to communicate with our bookkeeper. I have to make sure, I had to realize at some point I had to share the love, meaning I had to hire my first employee, which was in 2021. And Lindsay, my assistant director, who I was just referencing, she had to start learning some of the financial processes that I was taking on because I needed help. And so Lindsay and I share a lot of the same oversight, day-to-day operations, but she manages all the programs. So she, more than I, has more insight on the programs and the costs and the budgets, and we're having conversations now about next year of what we want to change with the programs, but then building that financial infrastructure, I then have to take it to my finance committee, and then we have to vote with the board. And it can be challenging sometimes when people don't agree with, what we want to do moving forward. So that's one thing, but I think communication is just that more important. The other thing I will say is having the policies in place, the what ifs, being prepared for those challenges. With a fast-growing organization, we didn't do all of that right away, and we just hit the ground running. So I will tell you all that on June 23rd of this year, I was a victim of fraud. And it personally was the most traumatic event of my life. And I told you this today, I had cancer. So you can imagine the depth at which this really impacted my life, so that it also impacted the organization. But I will share that it didn't impact because we had reserve. We had 2 sources of reserve. So we saved for a rainy day, and we saved for an additional 3 months should something happen like a pandemic. But because of our financial infrastructure, we were able to strengthen the organization because of the policies that were in place, because of the communications that immediately happened, because of the teamwork that we had. So I know that more challenges are going to come for organizations, but with the right policies, with the right infrastructure, with the right communication, with the right team, with the right oversight, all of that combined, you're prepared to have those challenges. So I think it's all of that at once. I know a nonprofit right now that's probably going to go under because they didn't have the policies in place. So you're always learning, you're always strengthening, and sometimes it does take 2 steps forward and 10 steps back to learn things. But you become stronger if you all work together and have those policies in place and infrastructure.
Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Emmie, as I mentioned before, I think the Pittsburgh Foundation has a somewhat unique perspective, given the number of organizations that you're working with and talking to on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. So I wondered if you could share with us any trends that you're seeing in not-for-profits and maybe how they're adapting and strengthening their financial strategies.
Yeah, I thought a lot about how to answer this question in this current environment, where we've had a federal shutdown, had for a record 43 days. We've had a state budget impasse for I think 135 days that is now finishing. So the funds are starting to flow. But we also see a lot of cuts to nonprofits coming out of the big beautiful bill. It'll be difficult for individuals to obtain SNAP, aka food stamps, to access Medicaid. And so we're going to see a need for increased services and a huge reduction in federal, state, and county spending to meet those needs. And during the shutdowns, a lot of nonprofits used reserves, right, to cover. They took out lines of credit that then have interest rates, and they're not sure how they're going to repay that interest. Some nonprofits let people go. Some nonprofits had to cut programming. And what we're hearing overwhelming from the nonprofit sector is that a struggle is ahead. And I think what I definitely didn't realize until I moved into this sector and did this work is that by a lot of accounts, 30 to 40% of nonprofits in this state receive significant levels of federal, state, and county funding. So as that funding goes down, financial management becomes more and more of a challenge. And I can talk in detail about the ways nonprofits are rising to meet this challenge. They are many. Stephanie touched on them, Nate touched on them. Nonprofits are resilient. They're creative. They already work on a shoestring budget. They know how to do this, right? Nonprofits are trying to build reserves. They are diversifying their revenue sources, right? They're looking to grants from foundations, individuals, corporations. They are collaborating. They're looking to share space, right? Physical space. Maybe two organizations come together to share rental space. They're looking to share back office services in some cases, right? They're looking for additional revenue sources. Did any of you attend a Pirates game this summer? Raise your hand. Pirates game, who saw the Pirates? Okay, did you walk by a barge that had a bar on it where people were hanging out? Yes, so that was created by a nonprofit here in town called River Life, if you're familiar, that works on Pittsburgh's rivers. That's an additional revenue stream for them. How that turned out for them, I'm not clear, but they were trying a new revenue stream. And also, obviously, meeting their mission by bringing people down to the city's rivers. So nonprofits are creative and resilient. But what I will say, and I want hopefully everyone in this room to take away today, is that there is no substitute for government funding for these nonprofits. If we emptied our coffers, the foundations, say all of them in the city of Pittsburgh, it would not replace federal funding and state funding. It's billions of dollars out to nonprofits every year. So, we have a struggle ahead, and it will affect, those who are experiencing poverty the most. So if you have a favorite nonprofit or a cause you really care about, end of year, this year is a great time to reach out to that nonprofit and see how you can assist or help, whether that be monetary, service, or spreading awareness. So we're really seeing at the system, I wish I had better news for everyone, but at the systemic level, we're really seeing a lot of challenges, although we know, and as we see here today, nonprofits are resilient and will continue to serve. So, thank you.
Thank you. Megan, I think Don left his soapbox up here, so maybe you want to borrow it for this next question, but what trends are you seeing? How can organizations better prepare for an audit and use it as a tool for improvement?
We should probably record this and just send it out, as we're sending out inflow requests, we can just, put it on there for any of you who are familiar with inflow. But I would say two things come to mind here. I would say organization and mindset about the audit. So from an organization standpoint, having your records accumulated throughout the year so that it's not sort of a scramble when it gets to be audit time. Documenting, I talked about donor restrictions, documenting donor restrictions, as those things come in, maintaining all of your grant agreements and support, and reconciling accounts sort of throughout the year. I would say doing all of that throughout the year rather than, in preparation for the audit is really helpful to sort of set things up for success. I think most of the nonprofits that we work with and many organizations that we work with, they're very good at managing the day-to-day operations. You have to be able to deliver your services. But I think sometimes, the things that are not quite as frequently looked at are the things that they're simply not looked at and sort of glossed over. So, taking the time to go through everything before you submit things over for audit is helpful. When we talk about mindset, I would say use an audit, as an opportunity to sort of measure where you're at, and then, look for ways to improve. So think about this, many of us wear health tracking devices. So we have an Apple Watch, we have an Oura Ring, we've got Whoop bands, any of those kinds of things. You're tracking that data and that information, and it gives you some good feedback. You look at what you're strong at, and then it gives you areas for improvement too, and ways that you can improve. So from a mindset standpoint, if you can think about an audit that way as, looking at what the organization is already good at, and gets high marks in, and then also, being open to hearing some feedback on efficiency or best practices, good governance. That's something that we can offer, as we're going through those audit services. One other thing I would say is that engagement is really important and helpful for us as auditors too. When we get questions asked back of us of, how should we be treating this? How should we be thinking about this? It's helpful for us to have a dialogue and a conversation. And it's certainly helpful to have that at the leadership team. It's also really important to have that at the governance level. So, an audit or finance committee or a board level. It's assuring to us when we get good engagement at the board level. It helps us know that throughout the year, the board is looking at the financial information, asking questions. Not everybody at the board level needs to be an accountant. It's helpful to have one or two that are serving in that capacity, but anyone who's able to ask questions and remain curious about the organization and bring up those questions.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yes, please. That'd be
Yes.
perfect. We have 3 minutes left. I would
I'll
love
be
it if
quick.
you would ask.
Yeah.
As a recipient of Inflow, because we work very closely with Megan and her team, it is very user-friendly. We are very appreciative. We are so thankful that they come in and they're collaborative. I have millions of questions for them every year, and they know it. And I have no idea sometimes what they're asking of me, but they walk me through it hand in hand. So my first thing to say is be patient with nonprofits, because half the time we don't even know what the jargon is. And so I'm not ashamed to say that, but I'm learning, and hopefully it's getting easier. But be patient with nonprofits, because we are learning so much, and we are just so grateful for them, because they are holding our hands, and oftentimes talking about the financial infrastructure. There are times each year that I bring in Lindsay or I bring in our bookkeeper, because I don't even know the answer to that. So it's just such a blessing to have such teamwork surrounded by the audits and the 990s and the BCO 10s. So I just wanted to compliment you all for helping us personally and
Great.
promoting Inflow.
Great plug.
Thank you. Inflow is not just for not-for-profits, so it's good to have that endorsement.
Anytime.
All right. Well, we are closing in on the end of today's program. Just wanted to say a sincere thank you to our panelists. Thank you for sharing your personal experiences. Thank you for sharing a little bit about your organizations. We've got a great network of folks in this room, and Emmie, you mentioned a little bit about some of the challenges that are out there from a funding perspective, and hopefully there are ways that we can find to work together as a community here to help one another. So we really appreciate the opportunity to serve the not-for-profit community, and we really enjoyed the opportunity to provide some not-for-profit insight here today. So again, thank you very much for your participation, and we didn't have time for questions today, but I know some of our panelists will be around at the end of the day, so please feel free to track them down and ask any questions that you might have. So again, thank you very much.